Alright, we've made some changes in plans, but we will continue with the inner primary, removing the seal. I don't have a seal puller, don't have different ways of handling it. Nonetheless, here is one way. Open-ended box wrench. This is a 16 mil, but I'm sure many other sizes will work. It will slip, actually. This fork will slip in underneath the seal itself. Use something else. I've got a dead blow handle of a dead blow hammer, and just put light pressure on the seal, and you will see as you go around and keep moving around that the seal will start to come out. It's a little clunky, but it does work. One thing to note is this ring, the snap ring itself. Let me see if I can get you a nice tight shot in there. Alright, I'm not sure how well you would see that, but actually you can see it, even if it's maybe a touch blurry. Let me reach across. Alright. This snap ring, split ring that holds this, retainer ring, this ring here, that holds this, again, if you have your snap ring pliers, you can see how it would go in and out. There's actually a small hole up here in the case, and that hole is an oiling hole for the bearing system. It is important that if you remove this, whatever system you put back in, whether sealed or open, this hole needs to be opened. And at the same point in time, you should check that hole for clarity to the outside world, from each side of the case right through here. And I can see mine is really nice and clean. It's cleared out. There's no indicator of a blockage here, and I think you can see through. Right? Let's see. Yeah, see, you can see through the case. Right? That needs to be opened, and it needs to be clear from that ring. If that ring is offset even a few degrees one way or another, that hole is blocked, and so you'd want to take that into consideration when you reinstall this setup. It is the race that I'm not sure if they've done any redesign, but and I am going to mount it, if I remember correctly, mount it the same way the bearing is mounted, with the words or the letters and numbers on the bearing as in the same direction as these. So these will be inside. Let's see, outside is all, yeah, okay. That being the case, I just want to see how it sets up and check the, yeah, that's good. That's a tight fit. That's a nice tight fit. That's actually still good for me. There's no play. It's actually really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse the stock system. I'm setting up for driving home the new seal. Again, this seal, it actually says it on the seal itself. Let's see if we have a yeah, right there. It says oil side, and the oil side goes toward the bearing. Boink. All right, bear that in mind. Okay, so I have the inner primary leveled front to back for the most part. Stable enough anyway to drive the seal. There's a wooden block underneath, a wooden wooden block similar to this, only larger, a little larger, that really covers the race area, the casting area. And I'm going to go ahead and lube the inset area. So there's a little transmission oil here. Go ahead and lube this contact pad area. And again, we did talk about the little hole here between the tabs of the split ring that needs to be open, whether you did a sealed bearing configuration or a regular stock bearing. If this does come out and you do it again, make sure positively that that hole is clear. Okay, enough of that. At this point, this is the new seal. I'm just going to seal the, show you a little bit more maybe on the inner. You want to make sure that you oil this inner seal, the inside part of the seal. I'll do that again before I actually install it. As the shaft that drives through this moves very quickly, and if it's not oiled, it's a fact that the inner race can burn it up. Alright, the inner race is spinning quickly, everything's spinning very quickly. If you don't oil this on reassembly, you may find yourself back in this case sooner than you think for another leak. Same exact type of thing. Alright, that being the case, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hand set that's sitting pretty good. I'm just going to go ahead and alright, that's flush mount. Now it does need to go in just a touch more. There's a chamfer, slight edge here, a recess, slight edge along the casting, and you want to drive this bearing a little bit lower, just a touch. Piece of 1.5 inch PVC. You want to get that just below that. I'm not sure if I can put the right amount of pressure on that by hand. Actually, you can. You know what? Once it's set up, at least for me, I feel it recessing with my fingers. I can feel it with my fingers. Let me see. Yeah, see that? I'm doing this with my fingers. Okay, that's set. Let me clean that up a little bit. Alright, I've done that with my fingers. I've set that. You see the chamfer. Not sure if you can see it. I will get in a little bit more on it here like this. Alright, nonetheless, that seal is good. Bearing is nice and bearing's definitely good. The race that I inserted into it earlier is nice. Let's see if we can get a shot, a more detailed shot of the chamfered race area. As you can see, here's the top of the casing, and as it comes in down into the seal area, there's this little edge of the actual case itself, and I set the flat edge of the race seal to that. So it comes in, drops down a little, and then goes flat again. Alright, that's what I did. That's what I recall being in the as the stock. Alright, so what we're doing now is we're going to drive on the inner race up to a certain point on the main shaft. And that certain point I'm actually going to use my puller to determine. Why? Because this puller was what, I actually ground down the back edge of the puller tabs to just when they slipped behind this race when it was stock. And it had not walked. This race had not walked originally. Stock race had not walked. This is a new race. I'm installing a fresh one. So I'm going to simply use this setup as a determination for where and how deep I need to drive this race. I'll keep checking it as I go and as I get down deeper. And I actually even see a line. I see a line still in the main shaft where the race ended. I can tell that's where it was because I can see precisely where the puller arms are in relationship to that line. So how I'm driving this on, I should have my other dead blow hammer, but a piece of Schedule 40, 1-inch Schedule 40 that you will have cut, but at the same point in time make sure and flatten off the edges. Flatten off these edges before you attempt to drive the race with it. The reason being is if this edge is at all on an angle or off, you will start to drive this incorrectly and it will be work. It can damage, and it's just grief. So flatten these off to some semblance of flat, and then you'll have a much better way of going at it. That being the case, another 3/8, quarter inch maybe. I'm going to take it to about a quarter. You see the end of the splines on this side of the race just showing. Alright, approximately another 1/8. Now with the race on, we are ready to, what are we ready to do? Start prepping the inner primary area for assembly. I am going to reuse a few bolts. I'm going to reuse the inner primary bolts that go on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure exactly where they connect up. 5. And go ahead and reuse that. I'm going to reuse a couple of gaskets. Certain things I'll reuse in preparation for when I do the clutch. Okay, that's where we are now. Inner race is on. We're ready to go. Bike is still in neutral. Alright, we're about to get the inner primary on. A couple of notes. One, I am myself, again, I'm reusing this inner gasket for the inner primary. Many of you may need it replaced, but mine is in good condition. The inner edge of this ring has a type of silicone gasket material. Mine is still kind of nice and fat. I don't see much compression going on. It actually looks like it's in still pretty good shape. As far as putting the assembly back together, these are your starter bolts. The starter bolts have a split ring lock washer on them. You may want to reset those, and again, if you don't have another set of lock washers, as I do not. And in doing that, all I mean is take the ring off, grab it with a pair of pliers on each side of the split. And go ahead and just give them a little bit of a turn. to reset the split. And what I mean by that is they would have flattened out. All right, so now when you tighten these up, when they go to reverse, they'll grab on again. Now, I am going to install the alignment dowels into the case here. Alright, so those are in. They'll hold for the most part. This material, I'm going to use a little on the inside of these bolts. Very little. Very little. And I'm also going to apply blue Loctite. The thinnest layer here. Why? I don't want it dripping down into my work. I don't want the excess once it's squashed down actually getting into the case. And it takes up very little to do the job. Matter of fact, the original gaskets that you'll see if you're doing it, you see these little, there are some gaskets already in there, and they have a bit of a memory to them, so they compress and squash, but overall they'll most likely still do their job. Now these are aluminum. I think these are I can't quite tell. I can't quite recall if these are aluminum bolts, but the torque on them, whatever the torque is, go on the lighter side. If you're going to reuse the bolts, go on the lighter side of your torque range. Alright, so with those set up, I'm going to apply a little bit of blue Loctite. At this point, verify this, an important aspect, actually really important right now. The this inner part of the bearing and race, and certainly the seal, the inner part of this seal, make sure there's lube on it. Also, lube up the race pretty well. Get a good solid coat on there, just for the sake of having it. I can tell just by finger it's nice and clean too. At this point, alright, not sure where the video ended last time. We're torquing the starter bolts to between 13 and 15 foot-pounds. I've already gone ahead and done a setup on that, and that's 20 pounds. Alright, I started at around 15 and then went to 20, and we're good to go. Starter is installed into the inner primary. We're done for the most part on that side, besides remounting the battery box. The one thing I do want to make sure I get back in is this. This is the transmission breather tube. You can see it's got a little Loctite on it. I'll go ahead and install, what is that, steel? Looks like red Loctite. I'm a fan of using kind of blue at the moment, except on high-end tension parts. So I'll go ahead and get that reinstalled. Then we'll install the battery box, the battery, and that'll be pretty much it on that side. Till then, we will continue on further. have your bolts ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and set this up with some red Loctite as instructed in the manual. It says a couple of drops. I usually just run a little bead down the 180 degrees from one another. Also, I'm going to use red Loctite on this assembly here. Alright. Another thing to do, have your socket for the clutch pack already sitting inside of the socket that goes on, because it's recessed inside a little bit and you don't want to be struggling with that. Do remember it's a left to tighten nut. Alright, you tighten it to the left, like so, okay? Bear that in mind. Just drop it into your socket, you're ready to go. Again, it is a strength move. The clutch pack is heavy. And you got to line up gears. So if your chain assembly isn't just right, you got to kind of work with it. Alright, that being the case, that's there. This is here. Everything else is somewhat out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and put the assembly together as one piece, holding it. And you got to mesh it. Actually, no, the starter's not an issue. Be careful of your threads. Really be careful of your threads with regards to this. Get this thing. Alright, good. Looking back, make sure you're hitting right into the hole. This as well. You'll have to turn it a little bit to line up the gears, the splines. I'm sorry, line up the splines on both the clutch assembly and the compensator is on. Clutch assembly is on. Alright, with that being the case, I'm going to go ahead and set up this screw like so. This is regular lefty loosey righty tighty. And again, this is a left to tighten. Be very delicate. If it gives you any resistance at all, there's a problem. And I'm not sure if, yeah, there we go. Just till you feel it tighten up. Just snug by hand. Alright, that's good. Remember this nut here. Are we seeing things? Yes, we are. Okay, 13/16. Just snug. Alright. That's a 1/2 inch. I'll use the... I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit more than snug. The primary chain adjuster, okay, there, it hit home. Primary chain adjuster we'll deal with in a few minutes. Alright, looking good. Make sure, as mine was actually, the chain had sagged a little low, and thankfully I didn't tighten that up too tight because it was outside the case. So I could have just, at the moment, caused myself some real grief. As a matter of fact, I did. I did a slight amount of damage to the, because of that, I did a slight amount of damage to the inner primary case. And I will resolve that. Okay.